Well, good evening. If Nathan told me correct, this is my last Wednesday, correct? Don't look at me like that. You two have to be up for sainthood on the first ballot with that. I mean, come on. No, I think next week is singing. Yeah. So, we didn't get through everything I would like to have gotten through. I think Drew last week covered chapter 11. So we kind of skipped 10, and tonight I'm going to cover 12. So we're going to kind of come up short with 13. So, but I wasn't going to skip chapter 12 because if you had to ask me what's my favorite chapter in the Bible, it's going to be Hebrews chapter 12. So I hope this has been an enjoyable class for you. I will tell you, every time I do this, I learn more each time. So thank you for your input and your participation. I don't like standing and just lecturing, so that's why I ask for help and I ask for discussion. I don't think I really had to call on anybody specifically the whole time. So let's not ruin it tonight. No, I really do appreciate your participation. Several people have come up to me after class and given me ideas about different things going forward. I have noted those and trying to get better at it. It's fun, but to me it's a lot more fun when it's back and forth and everybody's participating. So, all right, if you would turn to Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood, and you have forgotten that word of encouragement that addresses you as sons. My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes everyone he accepts as a son. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is not disciplined by his father? If you're not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you're illegitimate children and not true sons. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of our spirits and live? Our fathers disciplined us for a little while, as they ought. But God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. I can relate to that one very well these days. Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Make every effort to live in peace with all men and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one misses the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance as the oldest son. Afterward, as you know, when he wanted to inherit this blessing, he was rejected. He could bring about no change of mind, though he sought the blessing with tears. You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem, the city of the living God. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all men, to the spirits of righteousness, righteous men, made perfect, to Jesus the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we're receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. So let's start with the first 3 verses. What do you think of when you hear, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses? Keep going. Keep.
Of all of the past patriarchs.
Yep. And so, how do we draw that for us today? What is the great cloud of witnesses that we have, that we are standing before? We have all the faithful who have gone before us, absolutely. We have each other. And we have a hope. What are some of the things that jump out to you as far as those things that entangle us? TV. I think we all see that one in well too many fashions. You know, I will tell you, for the last 2.5 months, I can't sleep through the night because of my left knee. I've got a torn meniscus that pinches and it wakes me up 3 or 4 times a night. And I tell you what, it was easy to start feeling sorry for myself. But then I had my wife and a couple other people point out to me, don't take out on everybody else what's bothering you. I was talking to one of my folks on the way here tonight, and she looked at me one day. She walked into my office and she closed the door and she looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?" I looked at her and I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." She said, "Well, then act like it." Now, for those of you, if you'd ever met Heather, she is very direct. She's my HR director, and you know, she is very direct with me and she is very blunt. And she's like, "Craig, you're not acting like the person you should be." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She said, "Craig, you're short and you're rude." I was like, "Okay." I was like, "How can you tell I don't feel bad?" And so, you know, it's easy to let our struggles change who we are and how we are. And at the end of the day, I may not be sleeping, but at the end, as I look back on everything, it could be a whole lot worse. I could be headed tomorrow for the same thing I had done on my right knee, but that's not what's necessary. It's easy to get distracted by things like that. What else? Pardon me? Finances. Anybody in here who has never had a financial issue in your life, please raise your hand, because I want to shake your hand, because I've never met a person that hasn't been there. But God will provide for us, and it's not that He's suddenly going to make a deposit in our bank account, But if we trust him and we serve him, he will provide a way for us. What else? I am going to pick on one person tonight. Jason, how hard is it to run a business in these day and ages with people's work ethic, expectations, and lack of integrity at times? Piece of cake. There you go. See, it's really not that hard. There are so many things going on around us, and Brett touched on some of it. I work in higher ed. Will does, we work the same place. If you tried to be a conservative, outspoken person on a campus, you're going to have a problem. And it's hard. You know, I do what I can, and I know Will does as well, but, you know, it's hard. It's hard because you're going to be told you have to accept this or that. And, oh, thank you. The world is going to tell you, and it's not just what Will and I deal with at UAB. The world is going to tell you all kinds of things that you have to accept. How do you stand up to it? How do you fight back isn't really the right term, but how do you stand your ground? How do you make sure people know who you are and whose you are?
By how we live, no one else can control my behavior but me.
Absolutely.
Same way the apostles did.
Pardon me?
Same way the apostles did.
Okay, keep going.
Well, they suffered tremendously for their beliefs and their teaching, but they had the inspired word that they knew, even though they couldn't show it to the people in the book at that time, but they suffered and died for what they knew was right. I don't know if we're willing to do that this day and age.
You get labeled if you say something's wrong these days. It may even cost you the opportunity to progress at your company. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's easy to just be quiet. It's easy to not say anything. You know, it's you know, I guess, well, Alabama's doing away with the whole DEI concept, but when I was in Virginia, I had the same thing, and, you know, I will always be able to treat every employee equally. I don't care about any of that stuff when it comes to the work that I've assigned them to do. But nobody will generally ask me my opinion because they don't want to hear it. Because I'm not going to be conducive to it. I'm not going to be supportive. I'm not going to treat them any different, but I'm not going to champion their cause. What are some other things that become a struggle? Parents with kids. Are kids ever an issue? No. See, we need to next talk about truth because I know his son. No, I mean, there are times when, you know, I love my sons to death, but there are days I just can't stand the sight of them. And it's easy to lose sight of the entire purpose and the entire process with an individual incident. It's easy to get caught up in it. So when you hear the phrase, run the race set before you, what do you think of?
How slow I am.
I'm much along the same way, because if somebody asked me to run a race, that'd be the second time I did it. When I ran a 5K with my with Travis once. Actually, he could have done it 4 times in the time it took me to do it once. So I did what I could do. To me, I don't understand. I understand the concept of running a race, but I've never run for enjoyment. It's never been something that caused me enjoyment. When I think of running my race, it's more a focus on keeping going. Because when I think about running, the last thing I think about is something that is positive or helpful.
That scripture mentions endurance, right? And so there are different kinds of races, and endurance race. I think about the marathon, right? Watching it in the Olympics or whatever, and just that. Of course, they were all trying to win the race, but it was very interesting to watch that race and how happy they were. So the first 3 were sort of super happy, but everybody was happy that they completed that race. It's a little different than the 100-meter dash, but success is not necessarily measured by being in front of someone else, but by completing the race. And I think that this being talked about as our Christian journey being a race of endurance. We're not trying to beat one another. We're trying to complete the course.
So anybody who follows me on Facebook, over the course of the last few weeks, you've seen me post about a young man named Quincy Wilson. 16-year-old, was running in the Olympics, youngest ever male athlete, youngest male track and field athlete to compete in the Olympics. Melissa and I had the privilege of sponsoring his dad at the Naval Academy. And it was great, though. Before the Olympics started, we watched him run out at the Olympic trials. And Melissa and I were jumping up and down screaming while he was running. And then we get to the Olympics. And Quincy ran the first leg for the United States. There were 8 people in that race. Anybody remember where Quincy finished? 7th. The only person that finished behind him was a guy that lost his shoe coming out of the starting blocks. That's a true story. But I watched how Quincy would post over the days after that. And I watched how Roy, his dad, would post over the days after that. And watching the way he handled, he ran, if he had run the race he ran in the Olympic trials, he would have been in 3rd place coming out of that leg. But he was 3 seconds slower than he ran in the Olympic trials. But I listened to him when they interviewed him. And I asked him, how did you feel? He said, there's a part of me that will cherish this for the rest of my life. But there's a part of me that says, I should have done better. And I think that really kind of encapsulate what Tim was talking about. Every day is going to be a sprint for us. Every day is a race. Some days are going to be better than others. Some days you're going to finish and get a medal. Some days you're going to wonder, why did I even get out of bed? But at the end of the day, it is the long-term race that you're running. And it's the practice, exercise, and demonstration of your faith. And this is a big change. Remember, the audience here are new Christians and recently converted Jews to Christianity. When Christ is gone, it would have been easy for people to fall back and to slip back. And chapter 12 is a message of hope and a message of encouragement to continue that race, continue what's going on. You're going to have things that will pull you back. But don't let them entangle you. Don't let them trip you up. Don't let them make you fall. Any other comments or questions about the first part? In verses 4 through 7, it talks about discipline. What purpose does discipline serve? I'm sorry? Correction. What else does, pardon me? It gets us refocused, absolutely.
Discipline demonstrates love.
How?
When discipline is administered for the right reason, we're trying to get, think about children on the right track, right? Discipline, the right kind of discipline is because we care, right? You see a lot of cases where no discipline is administered and it's just a lack of care.
I will tell you one of the lessons I learned early on when we had kids. I disciplined the boys one night out of anger. And I grounded them for 2 weeks. Huh? I grounded them for like 2 weeks. Now, mind you, I got up and went to work every day. And I believe this was during the summer, was it not? I told them they were grounded for 2 weeks, I think. After the first day I got home from work, I walked in the door and Melissa looked at me, she said, "We gotta talk." I said, "Okay." I didn't realize what I'd done at that point. And she said, "You do realize the only person you're punishing is me." And I looked at her and I was like, "Okay, what do we do?" And she looked at me, she goes, "You've got to assess whether or not that was the right punishment." Now, I'm smart enough to know when Melissa points something like that out to me, I really, really need to reconsider what I've done. And so, it's hard to discipline. And you have to discipline, as Tim described. The discipline that he's talking about here is discipline in love that is designed to change behavior. It is for correction, absolutely is. But it's done in love to understand why the correction is necessary. What are some ways that we can show love when we correct somebody? It's hard. It's hard to look at somebody and say, "I really think you're doing something wrong here." What are some ways to go about doing that you can do that and show a spirit of love?
First, you have to have a relationship with that person where they realize that you already love them. It's easier for them to swallow if they know that you have their best interest. If you don't, you waste your time.
How hard is it to receive that discipline?
Depends on how prideful you are.
Okay?
Some people receive discipline pretty well. Some people receive discipline fight it tooth and nail.
How do we draw Jimmy and Jason's comments together? If we don't have a relationship with God that we understand He loves us, what happens when things go wrong? If we don't have that relationship, How do we process that and how do we take it? Why me?
Most people blame God when something goes wrong, especially if they can't put the blame on somebody else. It's just God's the convenient person to put the thing to him.
I don't think I could say it any better than James and Jimmy just said it. If we don't have a relationship with the person that's disciplining us, is it really going to work? I mean, we're gonna write it off as some type of excuse or, why me? So when things go wrong, and I can tell you the worst things that have happened in my life, 9 times out of 10, I can trace them directly back to decisions that I made and actions that I took that put me in the situation I was in. But how do you approach somebody? How do you approach a friend?
Take it individual, not in a group setting.
Absolutely. You pull somebody aside. You don't do it in front of somebody else. I think I'm sorry, go ahead. You first make sure you're not doing it. Along those same lines, be prepared for a response. And, my brother is one of the smartest people I know. And he will listen to you if you have something to say. And if you ask him, well, what do you think? He's going to look you in the eye, and if he doesn't think you're ready for it, he's going to say, you don't want to hear me. You don't want to hear what I have to say. If you ask him again, he'll tell you one more time, I don't think you want to hear it. The third time, sit back, because he's going to let it go. But you have to, it's hard to approach somebody and point out something wrong. And you have to acknowledge and you have to approach it in a spirit of humility. Because all of us have something that we do wrong. All of us have issues that we struggle with. And, one of the things that I have always struggled with is there are certain things that I just don't understand how they're that hard for people to do and how hard it is for them to stay away from something. But then when I sit back and look at my own life, you can say the same thing about some of the things that I do. Why is it I can't stay away? We all have different struggles. We all have different issues. But at the end of the day, you have to approach somebody in love. And I will tell you, the people who have approached me and told me when I was doing something wrong, the ones that were the most effective, always sat there at some point in the discussion and asked, could we stop and say a prayer? And so that person would stop. And they would start praying. They would pray for what the conversation we were having. They wouldn't be specific about what of that conversation, but that we were talking and we were meeting in a spirit of love and a spirit of friendship. And I will tell you, some of the people who have sat down with me actually during that prayer have said something that they're struggling with and asked that God would help them and that I would help them deal with theirs. And it is a whole lot easier to understand and take criticism or correction from someone who realizes and knows that they have the same issues, because we all do. When we get down to verse 7, it's talking about why God disciplines us. Why is it is the author saying God disciplines us? And how does he discipline us? He disciplines us as sons. You know, if I was sitting here and I saw Jonathan do something that I just thought I was wrong. I don't know Jonathan very well. I would be very uncomfortable having a conversation with him. But how do you move that forward if it's somebody who's doing something wrong? And I'm not saying I've ever seen anything like that with Jonathan. You have to engage in that spirit of love. Because I can honestly say, I never believed my father when he says this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. Because after he was done, I couldn't sit for a week. And he could. But as I've had kids of my own, it really does take a lot of love to sit down and have some of those conversations. And those are conversations that God has with us when we open the scripture and we read it and we go through what our faith is and what the expectations of us are and the expectations we should have of ourselves. It's hard. We are running out of time, and I didn't get very far. What are some of the other things that stood out to y'all in this chapter? I mean, there was a whole lot in here. You know, it talks about down in verse 10 through 12 about discipline helping to strengthen you. You know, and help you to be able to continue to run the race, stay the course, and not get tangled up in those things around you. What are some of the other things that really kind of stood out to you in the rest of the chapter?
Verse 14,
Okay.
first two words, pursue peace. If you have that in front of you at all times, even in your career, then you can achieve that peace.
I had a boss who early on in my career pulled me aside one day. Me and another person had been up for a promotion, and I didn't get it. And in my estimation, I completely and utterly outperformed the other person. And my boss looked at me and said, "Why do you think you didn't get this?" And I looked at her and I said, "I have no idea. I think it was a stupid choice." And she said, "Okay, what do you want to know from me? Why did you make that choice?" And the person, and my boss looked at me and she goes, "Craig, I'm not going to argue that you produce more, you have higher results, but at the end of the day, the bodies I have to clean up in your wake are 3 times what I have to do for this person. And quite honestly, that's harder than getting the results." And that goes to peace. You can correct people all you want. If you do it outside a spirit of love, you are not going to create peace. You are going to create strife and you're going to create resentment. When it talks about living in peace, does that mean we don't ever disagree? Melissa, do we always agree? Huh? Well, there is that. But when we have a difference, we do try and resolve it in love. We may have completely different perspectives and completely different ideas on how to do it. At the end of the day, we both know we're trying to get the same place. And we listen with a spirit of love and we listen with a heart of love. And so we're not always going to agree. But it's not saying to be agreeable. It's to live in peace. You know, it's a spirit of listening And there is not just one way for us to live our life. We all run into different circumstances. We all run into different situations. So we are going to do things differently. But living at peace also means not trying to stir up a problem.
We call it picking your battles.
Picking your battles. I think Travis is finally starting to pick up some of that. He's getting there. And it's absolutely true. Not every issue that comes up is worth really spending much time on it. I will guarantee you there have been times when Melissa looked at me and said, fine. And she didn't think it was the right thing to do under any circumstance. And I will tell you I've done the same thing. When the boys were young, I would defer to Melissa because she was with them most days, and I didn't always have context of everything that was going on. And, you know, living at peace means listening and trusting. What else? Has the first bell rung? Okay.
I think verse 25 kind of sums it up.
Okay, let's read 25. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? I think that's probably as good a place to draw the conclusion of it as there is. We have a history in front of us. We have a book in front of us. We have the benefit of knowing and understanding the full plan. The apostles and the people of the first century really probably didn't understand the fullness of what was being put in place. We do. We see it. We've been privy to the thoughts behind it and the structure of it and the way to make it happen. Again, thank you. It's been enjoyable for me. I hope it has been for you as well. I appreciate your time.